Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Data Governance 3.0. I'm joined today by Dan, who I'll let introduce himself briefly. Yeah, as the title indicates, we will be discussing what does data governance nowadays or 3.0 looks like, and discuss how does AI impact or enhance or augment data quality and data governance during this session as well. Dan, if you want to introduce yourself briefly before we get going.
Lovely. Thank you, Zach, and hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining this webinar. Firstly, thanks, Zach, for inviting myself. It's fantastic that both CluedIn and Microsoft are presenting kind of our joint perspective of data governance, but just as importantly of what the impact that is around our modern business as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity in that respect. So, let's kick off now, I think. So, and again, folks, if you do have questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat window and we'll get round to answer them as well. But I think when we move on to the next slide, what I want to really do is set the scene a little bit here as well. So look, some of these stats kind of which have been retrieved are around from Accenture and IDC and from Gartner as well. So the key thing here around when we talk about data and data architecture is the constant rapid disruptive change, and actually that's normal. Even if we look at the past 15-20 years as well, and we look at kind of where data's gone, some of the methodologies, the ideologies around big data, whether that's semi-unstructured data, big data, data lakes, etc. It really has evolved pretty quickly. And what's the reason? Well, the reason is that the end users want data in their hands. They want to be able to drive value from that data, and they really want to execute upon that to make business decisions. But ultimately, if we look at some of the stats there as well, only 32% of companies currently report being able to get value out of their data as well. So the amount of data in the world that there is, and obviously on the next stat there as well, of 220,000 exabytes of data expected to grow just in the next kind of 4 years or so. So these are phenomenal sizes, right? But again, only a third of our customers are actually articulating that they can get value out of that as well. And then the last point is that only 20% of organizations will actually even succeed in scaling kind of governance solutions for the digital age and the digital business. So again, that's what we're really trying to look at. What's the customer objectives? What's some of the challenges, and how we can look at Microsoft and CluedIn to really try and achieve the objective there as well. So moving on then as well, what are the common challenges? And again, this won't be new for any one of you listening or watching this webinar. The key thing really is a few areas like this. Data silos have been a challenge ever since I started my career within data. So when we look at the top one scenario here, fragmented governance solutions, to make sure that we are able to capture and understand where our data resides, normally we need many different solutions. And again, that's because it could be an SAP data source, it could be Teradata, it could be SQL Server, Oracle, etc., etc., etc. But again, we need different solutions historically to try and map out where all of that data is. And what that means is that we don't really get onto the second point, and that is trust of our data. What do end users want? Well, end users want a single version of the truth. I want to know that when I run a report, I want to know that my data is meeting compliance, regulatory standards, but also I want to make sure that it's truth. It's a single version, that if another person in my organization or my end customers look at similar data, that they're not getting variations on that as well. And then again, because of these dispersed data sources and the dispersed fragmented governance solutions, we actually have very limited visibility into our estate in there as well. If we look at a typical estate now, not only is it in the days of a data center on premise, we now have data in AWS, GCP, Azure, and as well as on-premise there as well. So how do we really get that true value of looking at data, understanding how we catalog it, and then taking value from that data there as well? And again, the last point, which links to all of this, is the complexities in some of these tools as well. We've almost had to hire in organizations, SMEs, into these tools just so that we can understand how SAP's data structures work versus Teradata, etc., etc. So again, when we move on, what's the art of possible? What's our aspirations of what we want to see in the future and this particular time now as well? So Zach, just moving on to the next slide. So let's reimagine what the path forward looks like. So again, we know that data is being created at a fast rate. we also know that we need to accelerate the value of businesses of how they retrieve their data. So we need to make sure that we adapt how we interact with data. We need to make sure that the cultural changes within organizations where business users, end users can truly interact all the way down the different layers of the data, because they're the subject matter expertise within their domains. We then need to make sure that we can modify how we manage and discover data as well. Is this IoT data? Is this batch data? How can we make sure that all of it is captured with the different terminologies and ideologies which are happening? And then lastly, how do we transform the way we access the data? We're all on our mobiles now, we're all on mobile devices. How can we make sure that that's still compliant, still holds up to regulation? We need to make sure that the right data is with the right person at the right time to make the right decision. And then the last slide from me, and then I will pass on to Zach as well to look at really how we solutionize this, is really thinking about the evolution of data governance. I think where people started off the journey of data governance and cataloging data, we really were thinking about it from a defensive mechanism. How can we make sure that our data doesn't end up in the wrong hands? How can we make sure that we understand where the data sits and resides within our organization? How can we make sure that we're upholding our compliance and regulatory standards as well, whether that's internal or external with industry standards? But then moving forward, really what we want to do is, like I've said, is drive that value. How can we accelerate responsible data value creation? But actually, I think it's a mix here. We can't forget the bit on the left. We really have to make sure that we are responsible and we are really the stewards and the governors of the data in our organizations and have that responsibility. But at the same time as well, this is the way that we can really advance and drive value into our business and move our business forward. Over to you, Zach.
Thank you, Dan. Much appreciated. Indeed, let's now look at where did we start and how things has evolved to put a bit of context into what is the current state of data governance or what it should be. Well, to get us started, when data governance first was created, invented, or put in place, it was more focused on bringing this idea of helping us control, not control, but manage our data in a way that is responsible and is going to help the right people access the right data, as you said, Dan, right? However, as many of the IT solutions or applications that have been created, it ended up being quite intimidated for the business. Therefore, it's owned by IT, and therefore it's an IT initiative. And we all know, and we came to know now more than ever, that data is a culture, right? It's an organizational initiative, and it's not only owned by IT or the business. It should be shared story or shared initiative. This is why we had to progress and we had to evolve to the data governance 2.0. Now, governance 2.0, it was all focused on the accountability or the shared accountability. As you said, Dan, it's all about making sure that we know who is responsible for what data and what they're doing with it. So we make sure that if there are any issues or challenges, we know how to address them and when to address them. So the idea here was to create or give the possibility to share data with the right people at the right time so they can use it for the right use case. Now, all of that is great. However, even though we really wanted to make sure that our colleagues from the business side as well as from the IT side to be part of the same story, technology has not catched up with us yet. So we had still that kind of the technology that is quite IT focused and quite intimidating for our business colleagues. So we didn't really get to where we wanted. We want to from accountability as an organization perspective. And this is where as a business as well, we have like objectives that we want to achieve, right? This is like common initiatives or common business objectives that any modern organizations want to achieve. Now, we talked about the context from data governance, right? I just want to take this slide here in between before I talk about 3.0 to kind of remind us where we are in terms of, not where we are, but what are we striving for? And probably everyone listening to this webinar can agree that these quite universal, right? Every modern enterprise wants to expand the market. They want to achieve new geographical expansions or new vertical expansions, right? We want to acquire our customers, but we wanted to retain the existing ones at the same time because we're a healthy business. We want to make sure that our product and services are diversified, so we're catching the attention of a variety of customers and enterprises that we work with. We want to have our partners and alliances and our environment and ecosystem as healthy as possible, because nobody makes it on their own. And of course, last but not least, we want to be as innovative as possible, so we are again catering for new markets and new personas, new customers. So these are some of the universal enterprise objectives that we're trying to achieve. um, Now, taking that into consideration, right? Everything we discussed so far is reliant on data, right? It's all reliant on data, and what does that data look like? And we're going to talk now more about how those objectives translate into or empowered by Data Governance 3.0, right? So, what is it first? What is it first that we want to achieve or we are at the moment? So data governance 3.0 is all about making sure that we're bridging the gap again between technology and data stewards or business domains or domains experts, right? We want to make sure that we're creating something that is less intimidating so everybody can be part of it. Therefore, we want something no code, no code, or low code, no code altogether, right? We want something that's going to allow me as a business user to use natural language, maybe just English, through an AI assistant of some sort. So I'm able to get to results that would otherwise require few days to get to that results or require extra sets of skill sets that I don't have. We want something cloud native, right, Dan? I mean, we're in so many projects at the moment where we're talking about, well, would it be, part of my cloud? And no, we want a solution that is going to be from the cloud for the cloud, that champions the cloud's values, right, from the get-go. And we want to make sure that it's not going to make our architecture heavy or complicated, or it's not going to work with what I've got so far. I want a solution that is going to gel in with what I've got. And we all know that the reality has a mix of, cloud based presence to on-premise to legacy systems, different data sources. So I want something that is going to be cross-platform and provide a lot of automation to make sure that I'm getting to value quickly. And of course, we want to visualize and we want to make sure that we're measuring what we are doing with our data so we know what happened and what we need to achieve moving forward, right? Now, I mentioned all of this is data focused, right? But who says data says quality of the data, right? We can't talk about data if we don't have that data in a shape that is going to allow us to get value from it from a data governance perspective or from an analytics tools perspective. And this is why there is a component within the data governance umbrella or under the umbrella, which is master data management, right? Now, for those who have been involved within the MDM space, they know that this is a topic that it's not a sexy one, and it has not been as agile or didn't deliver as much in the past because it was quite complicated, lengthy, resources heavy, right? But there is a different way. And this is what CluedIn is doing with Microsoft, is trying to change the way we go about making sure our data quality is there from an MDM perspective. All right. And just to put it simple in this, simple slide here is I want a data quality component or an MDM component within my data governance that is going to allow me to connect to all my data sources. Okay. And I don't want to be limited by what kind of data source, what kind of data it is it big or small? I want everything to be able to connect with that solution. Therefore, I want to cleanse the data, harmonize, deduplicate, and make sure I have one single version of the truth, whether it is my customer data, employee data, product data. And therefore, when the data is ready to be analyzed, is in the best possible shape for my organization. So we're getting that insights that we truly need to make that valuable decisions for our execs, or our execs needs to make that decisions, right? Um, Now, I thought to make things a little bit more clearer and again talk a little bit about how are we going to achieve our objectives as a modern enterprise in the era of AI and data governance 3.0. I thought let's bring a few examples together to showcase how AI is going to help us achieve some of the tasks that would otherwise be quite complicated and require quite few resources to achieve. Um, the first one is, I think, is a classic one. This is a very popular case when it comes to AI and data governance and data quality, right? Is how can we detect sensitive data, all right? And not any sensitive data. There are, as you know, types that would fit what we call deterministic patterns, like credit card numbers, IBAN numbers, social security numbers, right? But there are other type of sensitive data that doesn't fit that pattern or that code, right, or that format, which are, and examples could be names, addresses, job titles. So this is where large language models and AI are very good at helping us detect sensitive information that we have within our data so we can work with it and we're compliant, and make sure that, again, we are dealing with the right data at the right time for the right person, right? The other element that I want to mention here is, sometimes, and for those of you who are dealing with data day in, day out, will recognize this, is even those elements that would fit those deterministic patterns, right? Even some credit card numbers or phone numbers, they would still get in. And we will still find them as a data quality issue because simply there is maybe a space between two numbers. And that way it's not fitting that pattern and then it gets through, right? So what do we do? This is again where AI assistant or large language models are very good at helping us making sure that we mask what we need to mask and deal with sensitive data without us being exposed.
And Zach, on that, I think,
Sure.
for me, that's so important, right? Because,
Yeah.
if I look at many organizations that I've worked with, this takes a large amount of time, right? And actually, it's not the most impactful, valuable piece of work that you can do for an organization. Going through data entries, making sure it's in the same or similar format, making sure that we're obfuscating at certain levels, etc. Right? It's something which is required. Part back to that slide where we were talking about defense versus offense in that respect. But actually, I'd much rather have, our people, our domain data experts in our organization not doing tasks like this, but actually looking at the data of how we can then advance the business forward.
Absolutely, absolutely, Dan. Um, Next one, it's all about, mapping, and it's all about semantics and how do we join the data together. And probably and safely, I can say that this is the most tedious part of integrating data and bridging data together. And that is having to do with semantics, right? And mapping data between different systems. And this is not only to be able to map different tables and names together, but this is more about domains and column names, and often it exists, finding similarities and commonalities between these. And as you could imagine, if we talk about volumes, the task and how tedious is it going to be? And again, I don't want to repeat more or less the same thing, but this is where I think these large language models are going to have a massive, massive impact. Mind you that some of these systems have already huge presence online. If we talk about SAP or Oracle or IBM. So, and as we know so far, that LLMs or AI is very good at crawling at least the web. So they can access all of this public ready information, and that will help guide the whole mapping system, because we do know what a column mean if it's in German, for example, if we're talking about SAP sometimes, right? And it will provide that add value quite quickly. Therefore, our time to value is a lot more shorter. Um, as an example, I don't know, and we work a lot with SAP, for example, they would know what a kun table from SAP mean, right? I wouldn't know. I would have to go and Google search and so on. So this is where I'm thinking, something that is really tedious, labor heavy and takes a lot of time can be, shortened massively because we have in something like LLMs or AI that will help automate this whole process. So again, it's straightforward, but I thought it's very useful use case that we are seeing more and more and more and more, and we're helping customers achieve that quickly. Um, Move on to the next one, and I think this is my favorite one. And I think you heard me already say it, Dan, but it really is my favorite one. And I think it is one of those topics that we always talk about is, all right, well, we know the importance of data and what can we, how can we use it and what can we use it for? But always the question comes back, well, how can I make sure that everybody is literate, right? Everybody can work with data. Well, this is where I get really excited is, look, if we are able to leverage our just natural language and create and get to results that would require a huge amount of resources before, we can really now think that, okay, well, now we're actually going to bring new personas into the story of data and the supply chain of data, Therefore, my technical colleagues can work on building pipelines and lakes and data warehouse and move data, but then I can bring my domain experts so they can view the data and tell us what's wrong with it. Right? And now we're building an actual data culture within the organization that is not hindering anybody from accessing it. And this is why examples of Copilot and CluedIn Assistant, for example, for those that knows CluedIn are really, really helpful at.
And Zach, I think it's coming down to the fact of through natural language models and the LLMs, AI, it's really we're communicating with the data at the data level, not at an IT level, not at other domain expertise levels in that respect there as well, right? It's really talking to the data, about the data, for the data, at the data level. And for me, that's so powerful, right? Because, again, coming back to skills, anyone who joins your organization can upskill quickly in understanding the layout, the semantic layers within your organization without having to understand what particular semantic models you may have in place at the moment, etc., etc. So for me, this is really, really key, and it links into that end user story really, really nicely.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are quite few other examples we can go on to, but I think I will finish on this one before we talk about so what now? Compliance. Okay, let me give you an example. We had an event recently in Orlando, and in one of the sessions, I asked some of the audience, I was like, who wants to be a PII, or who is actually a PII or a data security, generally speaking, or CCPA expert, right? And guess what? No one raised their hands. And then I followed with another question saying, all right, well, who would want to learn more about it, or who would want, sorry, to be compliant, right? And obviously everybody rose their hand, right? So the idea here, just silly questions, but the idea here is, look, we do realize the sensitivity and the importance and how we make sure that we're dealing with our data in the right manner. But at the same time, we do know that these are really tedious and long, and and they do take a big chunk of your time going through, module after module and session after session. So obviously, we all want to be good enterprise citizens, but at the same time, we want something that's going to help facilitate this process and help us, be HIPII or HIPAA, for example, compliant or expert to a certain extent. And this is why we believe, again, in order for us to achieve the data quality, the data governance, that we need AI to help us proactively be compliant and bridging that gap between no requiring us to be an expert, but at the same time is giving us the tool to kind of highlight the important elements within our data that we need to take into consideration. And I think this is quite important because a lot of people are not struggling, but it's quite the task to get everybody on board. And as I said, it's training after training after training. And guess what? We're all humans, and it's sometimes it doesn't stick, and you have to redo it and redo it. And this is again where this learn as you go with the help of AI is very, very important. Yeah. So what does success look like? Like what? Give us an example, right? Um, So this is a case study that I want to share with you with a bank that we work with that we supported, and it's all about a data governance 3.0. So it does fit this example of this webinar perfectly. And as you could imagine, so to starting from the impact that we had, that number is absolutely correct, and we measured it with our customers. So we're talking about above £4 million per year of regulatory compliance that we have measured to support this customer avoid. Right? And this all has to do with this, as Dan mentioned, offensive versus defensive. When can we make sure that we're covering our bases, but at the same time, when can we make sure that we're proactive, right? How can we build a single view of our customer? Because that was the use case they wanted data governance plus an MDM solution for, is, they were like, okay, we need to get this done quickly, and I want time to value quick, and I don't have time to go through a 6-month or 12-month project that I, to get to this result. So help me make sure that I have a single view of my customer, so I can avoid these issues moving forward. And again, this is where the idea of making sure that we are having the right data for the right people at the right time is quite important. And all of that is done through this combination of Microsoft and CluedIn under the umbrella of Data Governance 3.0. The other thing that is very important on which I want to really close this webinar is how can we start? Okay, all of this is great and amazing. And I attend a lot of events, and I'm sure then you do as well. And there are a lot of ideas out there, a lot of suggestions, and a lot of. But where do we start? Because it can get a bit daunting. It can get a bit overwhelming, right? So this is where we always tell our customers, okay, listen, let's make sure that we're not trying to solve the whole issue. All right, let's focus on a specific scope or specific use case. Make sure it has an impact, good of an impact or impact enough, right? That we're going to see and measure ROI for it. And therefore, we can scale that success to other use cases to a larger scale. That's much more effective. It's going to be quick to be done, and we're going to get to results quicker. Therefore, we can learn from it and expand it. The other element that is very important is, as I said, this is not an IT-owned initiative, and this is not only a business-owned initiative. We need the right stakeholders to be part of the project, or you need the right stakeholders to be part of this project, right? Once you have the support around you, again, I think the translations are easy. We all know that we have to navigate complicated environment in our big organizations. So having that support around us from the right people is key in making sure this project is successful. And the other element is, again, data quality, data quality, data quality. I never can say that enough, because again, the old saying that says, elegantly, garbage in, garbage out, it is very, very true, and we're still battling it till now in the era of AI, where everybody wants to get on AI, but we still have those issues. So what can we do to make sure that our data quality is there so we can leverage everything we want to do moving forward? So how can we measure that is very important. And this is where we call it in a fundamental data quality, but I know it can get a little bit complicated, but MDM, or master data management solution, is one of, not the solution, but it's one of the key elements that help our companies, or our customers at least, achieve the data quality they need to make sure that they are happy with the results and the analytics they need to get out of their data. I think with that, it sums up our webinar. Thank you so much, guys, for your time. Then I appreciate you joining on this webinar with me. Much appreciated. If you have any questions, please pop them in the question window or the chat, and we'll make sure to get back to you on that. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Zach. Thank you all.